The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Here.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderwoman Howard. Alderman Rhodey. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Williamson. 23 present.
Quorum being present, we will be led today in prayer by Pastor Alex of the Dream Center. And I don't know how many of you know how much the Dream Center and Pastor Alex came through for us. They really did a great job in partnering with the Board of Aldermen for the employees' picnic, fed a record number of employees, and great time. Everything ran smooth, and it was largely because of the Dream Center, and I cannot thank them enough. Let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. Let's stand and pray, if you will. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for this opportunity that we have to be here this morning. Lord, we don't take our responsibilities here lightly. Lord, I thank you for these men and women that you have called to govern and to make laws and to put into practices the laws that have been placed already, Lord, in our city. Lord, we thank you for the wisdom that you've given them. We recognize that wisdom comes from you, Lord, and that we are able to do the things that we are able to do because you have given us the ability to do those. So, Lord, I just pray that your hand continue to be on this board with these aldermen and alderwomen, Lord, and all the city leaders and all the city officials that are governing. Lord, continue to let them lead us, Lord. And I pray that your blessings be upon them and be upon us and our city. Lord, I thank you for all those that work to make this city the place that it is. Lord, for all the workers and every area of work that they do here. Lord, I thank you for the soldiers and the veterans that are present, that are here, Lord God, that have fought and that are given of their service so that we can have the ability to come here in this wonderful city, Lord. I thank you for them. I pray special blessing on them as we come upon Veterans Day this coming week, Lord. And so, God, we just thank you once again for this opportunity to be here. Let your hand be upon us, Lord. You said that we have not because we ask not, so we're asking for direction, guidance, wisdom, and favor. In the matchless name of your Son, we pray. Amen.
If you guys are wondering if Pastor Alex ever played football, the answer is yes. He's a big old guy. He's a big guy. We will suspend with our regular order of business to take up our courtesy resolution count. I move for adoption of our courtesy resolution count, seconded by the Alderman and 20th. Alderman, would you like to approach the dais?
It's my pleasure to welcome the Bennett family here today, where we have a resolution in memory of the lives of Harry and Sandy Bennett. It's my understanding that I will be reading the resolution, and the assistant clerk's very happy about that. So this is resolution number 155, whereas Sandra Joan Bennett was born on August 22nd, 1940, as the first child of 5 girls and 2 boys born to Carol and George Hasser. And whereas Harry John Bennett was born on May 11th, 1939, as the first of 3 children born to Harry and Helen Bennett. And Harry Bennett graduated from St. Andrew's Grade School, Bishop DuBourg High School, and Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville. Sandra Bennett graduated from St. Anthony of Padua Grade School, Bishop DuBourg High School, and Webster University, summa cum laude. And Harry and Sandy Bennett became high school sweethearts and were married on May 5th, 1962, enjoying 50 years of wedded bliss. Their families affectionately called them Team Harry and Sandy. And whereas Sandy worked at General Electric, she worked here at the St. Louis Board of Aldermen. She was a legislative aide to U.S. Congressman Dick Gephardt, and as a scriptwriter for a local Emmy Award-winning cable TV program. She had an intense love for learning new things, which translated into countless hours of research, reading and writing about such things as genealogy, history, and family recipes, and she never met a book she didn't want to read. And Harry Bennett worked as an entrepreneur, realtor, small business owner, and commercial district manager for St. Louis Development Corporation, serving wards 9, 11, 20, and 25 at Cherokee Station, Cherokee Lemp, Chippewa Broadway, Carondelet, and Dutchtown's DT2, and served in the Missouri National Guard. He had an incredible work ethic, believed there was a solution to every problem with persistence, never met a stranger, was always looking for a way to help people, and dedicated years of service to the Lindenwood Park neighborhood, including as its president. And whereas Sandy and Harry Bennett raised 3 boys, one of whom is with us today, Matthew, Mark, and Michael, in their home on Oletha in the Lindenwood Park neighborhood, treasuring their 5 grandchildren, Zachary, Christopher, Emily, Sammy, and Sam. And whereas Sandra Bennett died on September 22nd, 2012, and Harry Bennett died less than a year later on August 31st, 2013. And whereas both Harry and Sandy had a profound commitment to community and service and left the world a better place than they found it. Now, therefore, we pause in our deliberations to recognize the contributions of Sandy and Harry Bennett to family, community, and country, and for lives well lived. We further direct the clerk of the board to spread a copy of this resolution across the minutes of these proceedings and to prepare a commemorative copy to the end that it may be presented to the Bennett family today. I have a whole lot of things that I could say. I prepared a whole lot of remarks, but I know we have a long meeting. I think that this says everything that I could possibly say. There's so much more that should be said. I would ask if Mike Bennett would be here to say a few words as well about his family, and then if we could present this resolution. Thank you.
I'll be brief, but I just want to thank the Board of Aldermen, the St. Louis Development Corporation, and the Lindenwood Homeowners Neighborhood Association for taking the time to honor my parents' legacy and service to the community and to the city of St. Louis. I can say that as a child, I ran around this room as my mom was secretary to the board, so this is a very familiar place for me, and I think pretty fitting that today we're honoring them for their 50-plus years of service to the community. Everything I know about public service I learned from my mom and dad. I've been in the military for 23 years, and I still serve on active duty, and I came back for Hawaii just for this today. So thank you for this great honor. My brothers and I are completely humbled by this. I see a lot of familiar faces, Tom Villa, Don Kenyatta, family and friends. It's just a great honor to be able to recognize their contributions to the community. And I'll just have one small vignette. When I was a child, my father would make us take the Operation Brightside trash bags and walk up and down the neighborhood to pick up trash. And we used to do that while we were canvassing for several of the politicians in this area, putting flyers on the doors. So that's my experience growing up, and I learned about public service through their legacy. So I appreciate your time, and my brothers and I thank you. My family thanks you very much for this honor. Thank you.
Any further comments? Any further comments? Alderman from the 23rd.
Just wanted to say that in my short term, I had the ability to work with your dad and create a friendship as the alderman of the 23rd Ward. And even though he worked in another neighborhood, he was always a part of the Lindenwood. We also have the pavilion in Lindenwood Park named after him. And now the Rose Garden just outside that's going to get dedicated and named after Jim Magnus, his good friend, tomorrow. So we appreciate the hard work that your dad did in our neighborhood along with Jim. And it was because of work that they did that makes the 23rd Ward, in my opinion, one of the nicest wards to live in the city, although there might be 28 other people argue that.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Also, on behalf of the residents and the people who cannot attend today, want to thank you for all the years of commitment that your family has given to the city of St. Louis. 50 years is a long time. I guess you know that, though, but 50 years is a long time, and I cannot thank you enough. I think we have a better city because of the commitment of your family, and it's a much stronger city because of the commitment of your family. So thanks again for your years of commitment. You know, this resolution, although it's but a piece of paper, but it is indeed the highest honor the board has to give. And what it does, it cements in time some of your family's many contributions up until this point. So 100, 200 years from now, when they research the records of the city of St. Louis, they'll find this resolution, and they'll find these words, and they'll be able to read about this meeting and know that we thought so much, that we paused in our deliberations today to make sure that your family was recognized for the many contributions. So again, congratulations, and thanks again for everything you've done on behalf of the residents of the city of St. Louis. Alderman from the 22nd, Alderman from the 3rd, is your person here? Alderman from the 22nd, I'd like to approach the dais.
Can you hand me those? Oh, doing good.
I'm going to take partners today.
Yes, sir.
He said, don't start me stuff.
Good morning, members of the board and our special guests. It gives me great pleasure today to stand before you and honor some great people that serve our country. As a former soldier retiring over 23 years in the Army, when I see and stand with men and women in uniform, it gives great nostalgia for me to reminisce and think about what an honor and a privilege it was to serve our country, and how I actually, after about 8 years of retirement, still miss it. And we're going to honor 3 individuals who have done some awesome work for our country. And the first person we're going to recognize is Sergeant First Class Allison Gonzalez. So if she and her family, her husband, would come up. And I'm going to read to you just a short list of accomplishments and what Sergeant First Class Gonzalez means to our country. Whereas Sergeant First Class Allison Gonzalez was born in Atlanta Highlands, New Jersey. She enlisted in the Army Reserves on October the 1st, 1985 at the age of 23. And whereas she went to basic training and attended advanced individual training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. After her training was completed, she was assigned to her first unit in Sacramento, California, where she spent 2 years doing training in food service and hospital food service. And whereas she then enlisted in the regular Army in 1987 and was assigned to Fort Polk, Louisiana, Spending 3 years working food service operations, she came off of active duty and entered the Individual Ready Reserve in 1990. Sergeant First Class Gonzalez then re-entered the United States Army Reserve in 1999 with her duty station in Artesia, New Mexico as a Tactical Water Distribution Systems Operator Specialist, being part of the first unit in the JRTC history ever to become fully operational. And whereas in 1999, she was called up for recruiting duty assignment to the Phoenix Recruiting Command stationed in Las Cruces, New Mexico, taking part in ensuring the strength of the Army Reserve, being awarded top producing United States Army Reserve recruiter within her company. She dedicated countless hours mentoring high school students on the importance of staying off drugs and staying in school. And whereas in 2001, she was transferred to the Army Reserve Career Division as a retention non-commissioned officer, serving as an assistant operations NCO, special missions NCO, Army Reserve counselor, compliance NCO, fleet manager, funds manager, medical readiness coordinator, and deploying for a year in 2010 in support of Operations Iraq and Enduring Freedom, and Operation New Dawn, supporting a team of 13 Army Reserve career counselors in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Kuwait. And whereas over her career, she attended numerous military schools, including Basic Leaders Course, Combat Lifesavers Course, Equal Employment Opportunity, Behavior Course, Employee Support Guard and Reserve. She is now attached to the 9th Battalion Army Reserve Center Division in St. Louis, Missouri, and assigned as Retention Non-Commissioned Officer. Whereas she plans to continue her career in the Army until retirement, she currently resides in O'Fallon with her husband, Mike Gonzalez. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause in our deliberations to recognize Sergeant First Class Allison Gonzalez for her many achievements and accomplishments and thank her for her service and dedication. And we further direct the clerk of this board to spread a copy of this resolution, the minutes of these proceedings, and to prepare a commemorative copy to the end that it may be presented to our honoree at a time and place deemed appropriate by the sponsor. Sergeant Gonzalez, thank you for your service.
I'd like to say thank you to everybody for awarding me this. It's been a great honor to allow to serve my country and to serve the people of the United States. Thank you.
And as an added bonus, Sergeant First Class Gonzalez, we as a Board of Aldermen would also like to recognize and honor you with the Great Seal of the City of St. Louis. Oh. Okay.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion?
The next honoree and outstanding soldier is Sergeant Darren Aleskevich. And again, here's a short list of his accomplishments and what it means to the City of St. Louis and the United States of America. Whereas Sergeant Darren Aleskevich was born in Kansas City, Missouri, he enlisted in the Army on April 21st, 1997 at the age of 22. Whereas he went to basic training at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and attended advanced individual training at Redstone Arsenal, Alabama. Sergeant Aleskovich's next assignment was Fort Lewis, Washington. While he was there, he spent 4 years doing training in logistics and performed movement of hazardous materials. And whereas after his first enlistment, he joined the National Guard in 2000. After a full year, he re-enlisted for the regular Army and was assigned to Fort Carson, Colorado. Starting in 2001, he spent several years working logistics at Ammunition Supply Point, supporting the whole post unit for their training needs. And whereas in 2004, he spent a year in Korea supporting an aviation brigade and additional ammunition and fuel needs. In 2005, he was reassigned to Fort Drum, New York. In 2009, he deployed to Iraq with the 10th Combat Aviation Brigade, working in both Operation Iraq Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. Sergeant Aleskevich was a part of a logistic team that supplied the Allied forces with ammunition, fuel, and water. He returned to Fort Drum and began a year-long training program designed to overcome the new challenges of Afghanistan. Whereas in 2011, he was deployed to Afghanistan where he continued working in logistics. He was a non-commissioned officer in charge of 34 soldier team that supplied fuel, rearmament point for the 10th Combat Aviation Brigade. He was in charge of $416 million of ammunition, fuel, and various other supplies. In 2013, he returned home to St. Louis and continued his military career in the reserves. And whereas over his career, he attended numerous military schools, including basic and advanced leaders course, modern Army combat, hand-to-hand, combat lifesavers course, field sanitation course, and several unit safety courses. He is now attached to the 620th Combat Sustainment Support Battalion in St. Louis, working as the ammunition logistics supervisor for his assigned battalion. Whereas he plans to continue his career in the Army until retirement, he currently resides in St. Louis, and his parents are Jim and Diana Oleskovich, who also live in St. Louis. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause now deliberations to recognize Sergeant Darren Oleskovich for his many achievements and accomplishments and thank him for his service and dedication. And we further direct the clerk of this board to spread a copy of this resolution across the minutes of these proceedings and to prepare a commemorative copy to the end that it may be presented to our honoree at a time and place deemed appropriate by the sponsor. Sergeant Darren Oleskovich, thank you so much for your service, and we appreciate you.
Wow, this is a great honor. It's been an honor so far to serve. I continue to serve, and for me, it's just wonderful to be back home in St. Louis and to have the opportunity to serve here. So thank you.
And again, Sergeant Oleskovich, we as a Board of Aldermen recognize you and bestow the Common Seal of the City of St. Louis upon you in honor of your service.
Thank you, sir.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion?
One last one. Yeah, go ahead. The next outstanding soldier is Staff Sergeant Tor Peterson. Staff Sergeant Tor Peterson, whereas Staff Sergeant Tor Peterson was born in St. Charles, Missouri. He enlisted in the Army on September 11, 2002 at the age of 19, exactly 1 year after the World Trade Center attack. And whereas he attended basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and advanced individual training at Fort Eustis, Virginia. After his training was completed, he was assigned to the 1st Unit in St. Louis. He deployed with the unit a few years later in 2005 as a gun truck commander, providing route security and overwatch to convoys delivering all classes of material throughout Iraq. And whereas he took part in combat logistic patrols working in both Operations Iraq Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom, Sergeant Peterson's security team helped provide stability to Iraq by delivering and securing voting booths for Iraq personnel to make their first free election in Iraq's history with a fair representation of all groups. He spent 1 month to 2 years consecutively in Iraq and volunteer extensions to help new units grasp the complexities of combat. Whereas he returned home to Lake St. Louis just before 2007 and continued his military career. To better train his unit, he attended numerous military schools, including basic and advanced leaders course, receiving honor graduate at both courses, modern Army combative hand-to-hand combat training, combat lifesavers course, unit trainers course, and many more. Staff Sergeant Peterson deployed again in January of 2012 and returned home in November of the same year. Whereas he is the detachment non-commissioned officer in charge of a 21-soldier movement control team leading a $240 million contract, the largest contract in the theater of Kuwait. Whereas Sergeant Peterson is now attached to the 620th Combat Sustainment Support Battalion in St. Louis, working as the Chief Movement Supervisor for his assigned battalion. He plans to continue his career in the Army until retirement. He currently resides in Winsfield. His parents are Paul and Mary Peterson, who lives in Lake St. Louis. Now therefore be resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause now deliberations to recognize Staff Sergeant Tor Peterson for his many achievements and accomplishments and thank him for his service and dedication. And we further direct the clerk of this board to spread a copy of this resolution across the minutes of these proceedings and to prepare a commemorative copy to the end that it may be presented to our honoree at a time and place deemed appropriate by the sponsor. Sergeant Tor Peterson, thank you so much for your service. We appreciate you.
really appreciate this opportunity. It's not too often that soldiers get to speak in front of a large group. I enjoy the battlefield a little bit better than speaking. It makes me more nervous for some reason, but appreciate your support, and God bless.
And again, Sergeant Peterson, on behalf of the City of St. Louis, the Board of Aldermen, we bestow the Common Seal of the City of St. Louis to honor your service to our country. Thanks again.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? I know I want to add my thanks and also congratulations for a job well done for each of our military heroes here today. I mean, it's a tough job. I heard the last sergeant say that Sergeant Peterson said that he would rather be in battle than have to speak before a crowd. That tells you a little bit about his character. That dude, that's the kind of man that makes it so that we can do things that we take for granted, like send our kids to the school we want to send them to. All these freedoms we take for granted, they're on the front line making sure that they deliver them each and every day. Let's give them one more round of applause. Alderman from the 1st, I thought you had something.
Mr. President, I was just waiting until special guest. I have a special guest, but I also want to add my congratulations. My sister did 23 years in the military and is a proud veteran, and so I really would like to thank all of our veterans and all the people that are currently serving in the military. That is a hard job, and I appreciate all the work that you do.
Alderman from the 3rd, your guest is here. Would you like to approach the dais?
Mr. President, members of the board, it gives me great pleasure to be able to introduce Mavis Thompson, who is the first African-American female license collector of the city of St. Louis. I think just that accomplishment is tremendous. Mavis was also the first African-American female of the circuit clerk's office. When you get old as I am, you forget some things too. Yeah, although it's written right here. So first circuit clerk of the city of St. Louis. She has done such a tremendous job in each position that she's held. She started out after she graduated from St. Louis University with a degree in law as a precinct captain in the 3rd Ward in the 2nd Precinct in the city of St. Louis. She has done such a tremendous amount of work in the 3rd Ward and in the city of St. Louis, and with the education that she has, and she's not just used it for herself. She's reached out to people, to the city of St. Louis, and has made a difference. Now she is the collector of revenue for the city of St. Louis, which says, and license collector for the city of St. Louis, which says a lot. So we have a resolution that we would like to present to Miss Mavis Thompson so that she can hang it on the wall. You know, resolutions are just paper. But one thing about them, when they are adopted by this Board of Aldermen, they are there in the history of the city and will remain 100 years. 150 years from now, if anybody ever wanted to look up Mavis Thompson, they will find her name in the archives and in the history of this city. So it gives me great pleasure to be able to read this resolution that we're going to present to Mavis. It was passed last week, and we'll give her an opportunity to say a few words to not only the Board of Aldermen, to the city of St. Louis about what it is that it means to be a servant of the people of the city of St. Louis. It says, whereas Mavis T. Thompson received the Bachelor of Science degree in nursing from the University of Missouri and later returned to earn her Juris Doctorate before becoming the first female elected circuit clerk for the city of St. Louis. She served as an assistant attorney general for the state of Missouri and graduated from the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. And whereas, as president of the National Bar Association, the nation's oldest and largest National Association of African American Lawyers and Judges, Mrs. Thompson is committed to increasing the number of African Americans pursuing law careers, and she is an active and generous mentor to middle and high school students, law students, and new attorneys. And whereas during Circuit Clerk Mavis' 6-year tenure, she has increased child support collections and improved fiscal accountability through automation and better management, modernized the storage of records, retrieval, and implemented numerous public and customer service programs, including hosting a monthly television show and writing a monthly legal column, both entitled The Circuit Breaker. And whereas Mavis Thompson has maintained a civil and criminal trial practice at law office of Mavis T. Thompson's law office and is admitted to practice before the United States Supreme Court and United States District Courts in Missouri and Illinois, as well as the United States Court of Appeals in the 7th and 8th Circuits. And whereas Mavis T. Thompson, Esquire, was appointed to the position of license collector for the city of St. Louis by Governor Jay Nixon, again making history as the first African-American female to serve the city of St. Louis in 2 different citywide elected offices, bringing with her a wealth of professional, governmental, and civic experiences. Mrs. Thompson's remarkable career is marked by her excellence of character and generosity of spirit. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause in our deliberations to recognize Mavis T. Thompson, and we further direct the clerk of this board to spread a copy of this resolution across the minutes of these proceedings and to prepare a commemorative copy to the end that it may be presented to our honoree at a time and place deemed appropriate by the sponsor. And all of the members of the Board of Aldermen signed on to that, which is a credit, and I certainly appreciate it because she is a resident of the 3rd Ward of the city of St. Louis, and we've done some significant contributions to the city government. The first African-American mayor came out of the 3rd Ward. So I would just like to be able to present Mavis Thompson so she could say to you, thank you for giving her this resolution, which 100 years from now, anybody that would care to read it and look in the archives of this city will see that she came before this Board of Aldermen who gave her the honor. Thank you so very kindly. Mavis.
First, always giving honor and praise to the Creator. I thank you very much for this esteemed honor. I am humbled by the opportunity to return to city government. I look forward to serving you as the license collector for the city of St. Louis for many years to come. Our doors are always open wide. We're in the process now of calling each and every one of you to set up a meeting so that we can figure out how the license collector's office can better serve you. I look forward to the service. Thank you so very much for this esteemed honor. God bless you. God bless the city of St. Louis.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 1st.
Mr. President, members of the board, I stand to rise to congratulate Mavis on her recent appointment. I want to thank the governor for such an esteemed appointment. I also want to say that today was a good day for former public defenders, okay? I read in the paper this morning that Ronnie White was being renominated by President Obama. This year has been a good day for public defenders. And so I want people to know something about, because Mavis is a former public defender, I was a former public defender, Ronnie White is a former public defender. Public defenders never die. They just come back another day to fight. I want you all to know that. This is a good year for former public defenders, and I look forward to working with you, and congratulations again.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I wanted to stand up and congratulate my sister for, first of all, accepting the appointment, because you have been very active in this city, state, and really around the country, and working on justice and all the things that are required to make people have a better quality of life. It's not easy being in politics, and most especially not during this period of time in our society. We have decided that it's a volley and that it's not really about being public servants. And I know you know what that means, because you come out of the 19th Ward, okay? So I know you know what that means. So I wish you well, and I think that as we move forward, we will see many things happen in the next 6 months or so. But at the end of the day, it is about those who stand true, honest, and serve the people. Thank you.
Alderman from the 20th.
I just wanted to welcome you back to St. Louis. I know a lot of people go up to Jeff City and go to all these highfalutin places, and they all tend to come back. I enjoyed our time working with families and kids years ago, and I look forward to continuing to do that now that you're back. I know you never really left, but welcome home.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Also want to just say thank you. Thank you for all the years of work that you've done all throughout the city, including on the Mountain City Bar Association and everything else, and I'm looking forward to working with you here at the city. I think you're going to do a phenomenal job, so thanks again for all your work. It's been moved and seconded that we adopt our courtesy resolution calendar. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries. With that, we turn to our regular order of business, introduction of our guests. Alderwoman from the 2nd.
Mr. President and members of the board, I'd like to have as my special guest today Ms. Antoinette Cousins, the Executive Director of Riverview West Florissant. Give her a round of applause. As well as there are a lot of 2nd and 27th Ward residents on the floor and in the gallery that are here to watch the proceedings from Board Bill Committee Sub 198. And even though Riverview West Florissant isn't included, they're here to hear the discussion. And I thank them for making the trip down here to listen to us. I hope we are in good order today.
Ask everybody if they'll join me in a round of applause. Let's welcome back the Alderman of the 4th Ward. He's had a rough go of it, but he's back. So, Alderman of the 4th.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, members of the board. I appreciate all the cards and letters, and you are all my special guests today. I'm not out of the forest yet. I got to wait to see if I'm going to have an operation on the 18th of this month, but I just came down to tell you and let you know that I love you and I miss you. And God bless you and keep up the good work down there.
All right, thank you all. Alderwoman of the 1st.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to introduce my special guest, who's Mr. Alfonso Wilhite, who lives in the 1st Ward, who was also my constituent when we were the 20th Ward, and has always been a strong supporter of mine, and I appreciate him coming down here. He holds down that 4900 block of Northland and makes sure if you ever come through the neighborhood on Christmas, Mr. Wilhite sets the bar for all of us to try to make sure that our Christmas lights are just right, and he keeps his property on the corner perfect. And we all know how special it is to have good corner properties, because that sets the tone for the neighborhood. And Mr. Wilhite keeps the bar very high, and I appreciate him coming down here and being one of our guests.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wilhite. Alderman from the 21st.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think he might have left already, but I did want to recognize Pastor Alex as my special guest from the Dream Center, and also Sal Martinez and Terrell Carter from the North Newstead Association.
All right, excellent. Alderman from the 25th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to welcome our friends today from the License Collector's Office, Isaiah De Lorenzo, I saw him earlier, and also the Treasurer's Office, Leonard Johnson, and their Coro Fellow that's working in the Treasurer's Office, Abby Escanez.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to recognize Damon Jones, the 6th Ward Committeeman in the gallery upstairs, as well as Abby Bush and Lisa Fainer with Parents as Teachers.
Hold on a second. Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have Ronnie Auer for my guest today and every other week.
All right. Alderwoman from the 16th.
Oh, thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I would like to have as my special guest today Anthony Lancia with the AGC, David Holmes with the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters. But for the very first time, I would like to have Gina Hackenworth, who is with Laclede.
Now the Alderwoman from the 28th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to recognize this morning Douglas Wagoner and Marcus Brown. Marcus, I think, is in the gallery there, both of whom are Coro Fellows, and we welcome them here to view our meeting today. Thank you.
Excellent. Alderman from the 23rd.
Yes, I'd like to have as my special guest today Gary Otten from the Painters, Al from the Firefighters, and Percy from the Firefighters.
Alderman from 26.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to announce my special guest today, Ms. Stephanie Robinson, Supervisor of Municipal Account with Airman UE. Thank you.
Alderman from 22nd.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I have several special guests this morning. The first two is Chris Pickle and Leroy Grant, representing AT&T. Keith Taylor, Joanne Williams, Paul Higgins, represent the Carpenters District Council, and Rachel Smith with the Circuit Attorney's Office.
Alderman from the 3rd.
Mr. President and members of the board, I'd like to introduce as my special guest the daughter of one of the best precinct captains of anybody could ever have. He's blind, but he does do a tremendous job in the precinct where he lives. And I got Michelle Townsend here, who's his daughter, as my special guest. And also, I'd like to ask you to kind of go back a little bit. She's gone now, but I'd like to have Mavis Thompson as my special guest today.
We also have with us Pam Ross. Let's give her a round of applause. I think all of our special guests today. Thanks, Pam. Thanks for all your work. Any further announcements? Any further introductions? Any further introductions? Alderman from the 10th like to wrap us up.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, today is November 8th. Many great things have happened on this day in history. In 1862, Abraham Lincoln was elected to his second term. In 1892, Grover Cleveland was elected. In 1904, Teddy Roosevelt was elected president. In 1932, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected president. And in 1964, John F. Kennedy was elected president. And I'm proud to have as my guest the only man present at each inauguration, Mr. Fred Steffen.
All right. Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to approve the minutes of the October 25th meeting.
Moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in sections A, B, and C of the agenda and have been placed in all aldermen's mailboxes. I have from His Honor the Mayor the following correspondence. Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the Civil Rights Enforcement Commission. The appointment of Ms. Lisa Gold, who resides at 4149 McPherson, whose term will expire on November 21st, 2016. The appointment of J. Justin Meehan, who resides at 2734 Lafayette, and whose term will expire on November 21st, 2016. The appointment of David Noble, who resides at 4363 McPherson, whose term will expire on November 21st, 2016. The appointment of Ms. Joanne Morris, who resides at 4040 Cook, whose term will expire on November 21st, 2016. The appointment of Ms. Carol Robinson, who resides at 3856 Humphreys, and whose term will expire on November 21st, 2016. The appointment of Mr. James Morris, who resides at 4149 McPherson, whose term will expire November 21st, 2016. I respectfully request your approval of these appointments. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from the 16th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the Civil Rights Enforcement Commission.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to refer these appointments to the Legislative Committee.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that change.
So noted. Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the Board of Building Appeals. The appointment of Mr. Stephen Molly, who resides at 5866 Lauren, whose term will expire on July 7, 2017. The reappointment of Ms. Joanne Morris, who resides at 4040 Cook, whose term will expire on July 7, 2015. The reappointment of Barry Burke, who resides at 1310 Papin, whose term will expire on July 7, 2016. The reappointment of Mr. Gene Culliman, who resides at 4121 Magnolia, whose term will expire July 7, 2016. The reappointment of Terry Flynn, who resides at 10257 Lookaway, whose term will expire July 7, 2017. The reappointment of Mr. Joseph Cunard, who resides at 5215 Quincy, whose term will expire on July 7, 2016. I respectfully request your approval of these appointments. Sincerely, Francis G. Slay, Mayor, City of St. Louis.
Alderman from 13th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the Board of Building Appeals.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to approve the mayor's appointments to the Board of Building Appeals.
Moved by the Alderman from 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 11th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
That's the extent of report of city officials.
We will dispense with line item 7. Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? We will dispense with line items 8 through 10. First reading of board bills.
Board Bill 227, sponsored by Alderman Conway, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission, the Board of Public Service, and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, establishing and authorizing the Public Works and Improvement Program at Lambert Airport, consisting of capital improvement projects for more fully described in the attached Exhibit A, entitled Project List, at a total estimated cost of $18,400,000, authorizing an initial appropriation in the amount of $10,959,022 from the Airport Development Fund and containing a severability and an emergency clause. Board Bill 228, sponsored by Alderman Conway, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller to enter into and execute the Lambert St. Louis International Airport First Right of Refusal Agreement, AL 319, between the City and Brownsville International Air Cargo Incorporated, doing business as Bi-National Air Cargo Terminals, and containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. Board Bill 229, sponsored by Alderman Boyd, an ordinance submitting to the qualified voters of the city a proposed amendment to the charter of the city, adding paragraph E to section 4 of Article 8 of the charter of the city relating to the granting of veterans preference to applicants who successfully pass examinations for civil service positions
providing for an election to be held thereon, and for the manner of voting thereat, and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 230, sponsored by Alderman Vollmer, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service to conditionally vacate equestrian and pedestrian travel in the irregular portion of Patterson, beginning east of Hereford and continuing eastwardly 210 feet to a point in the city. Board Bill 231, sponsored by Alderman Schmidt, an ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for 111 Winnebago. That's the extent of first reading of board bills.
Reference to committee.
To the Transportation and Commerce Committee, Board Bills 227 and 228. To the Legislation Committee, Board Bill 229. To the Streets Committee, Board Bill 230. And to the Neighborhood Development Committee, Board Bill 231. That's the extent of reference to committees.
Second reading.
Following board bill was reported out of the Public Employees Committee, Board Bill 219, sponsored by Alderwoman Florida, an ordinance to regulate employer and employee working relationships between the City of St. Louis and all employees under the classified service, including a compensation plan, terms and conditions of employment, benefits, amending ordinance 69189, repealing Section 1 and Section 2 by replacing said sections with provisions of this ordinance, and including an emergency clause. The provisions of sections contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period following the approval by the mayor. The following board bills were reported out of the Neighborhood Development Committee. Board Bill 205, Committee Substitute, sponsored by Alderwoman Cruzen, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 5774 DeGiverville and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 206, sponsored by Alderman Ortman, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2406 McNair and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 207, sponsored by Alderman Ortman, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2404 McNair and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 208, sponsored by Alderman Ortman, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2048 Victor containing a severability clause. Board Bill 211, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 2224 Indiana containing a severability clause. Board Bill 212, sponsored by Alderwoman Florida, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 4215 Connecticut and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 213, sponsored by Alderman Ogilvy, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 6905 Wise and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 214, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for 2905 through 2937 Olive. Board Bill 217, sponsored by Alderman Schmidt, an ordinance approving a redevelopment plan for 2728 Cherokee. Board Bill 218, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 1214 South Boyle Avenue. Board Bill 220, sponsored by Alderman Cone, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 4318 Virginia and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 222, sponsored by Alderwoman Ingracia, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 301 South Ewing and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 223, sponsored by Alderman Villa, an ordinance approving a blighting study and a redevelopment plan for 7716 Vermont and containing a severability clause. That's the extent of our second reading.
We will dispense with line item 14 and 15. Alderwoman from the 6th.
Mr. President, I'd like to request Board Bill 185 Committee Substitute be removed from the informal calendar.
Please proceed, Alderwoman.
Board Bill 185, Committee Substitute, sponsored by Alderwoman Ingracia and Alderman Boyd, an ordinance pertaining to all parks which are owned and maintained by the city, prohibiting any persons not accompanying a child from being in or on the confines of areas designated as children's play areas containing an emergency clause.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move for perfection of Board Bill 185 Committee Substitute.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th. I entertain a second on that motion. Second by the Alderman from the 9th. Alderwoman, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I've been working on Board Bill 185, Children's Designated Play Areas. Since before I came down to the Board of Aldermen, Fox Park was the impetus for this legislation. Over the past several years, there's been an inability for children to utilize the playground equipment because adults and older teenagers are hanging out and refusing to move. I've been approached by most of the residents surrounding the park, including Kip School, the daycare across the street, and St. Margaret of Scotland School about the issue. And as I did research and found other places in the United States who were successfully implementing children's only play areas, I decided to work with the city councilor's office, the mayor's office, your office, and some outside attorneys to come up with a solution. I also worked with the police department, and the captains that I work with and the officers who respond are supportive of this legislation.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion on Board Bill 185 Committee Substitute? Alderman from the first.
Mr. President, members of the board, I rise to oppose this legislation, not without first thanking the sponsor for introducing it. I understand where her heart is and what she's trying to do. I just don't believe that this legislation gets to that. Specifically, the whole purpose is to protect children, and we all want to do that. We've watched all the things that have happened to children when people have stormed into elementary schools and things like that. The problem with this is that it would criminalize me if I was at the playground, who I have no offenses against children at all, but a criminal who had a child could be on that playground. So I think that's one of the gaping loopholes in it already, okay? So if I was a criminal committing the criminal acts, those same people that she's talking about that act up, long as they bring a child, they would be welcome to the playgrounds anyway. So that is a big hole in that legislation, okay? The other thing is, why would I not be permitted as a city alderperson to go to, if I want to observe even my constituents, why wouldn't I be able to go to a city park where I pay my tax dollars? I think that a lot of times we want to end something and we overreach with our legislation. And so we pass these loitering laws that keep getting thrown out from the Supreme Court on down because they're not legal. I really thought about this because I believe that the alderwoman from the 6th, who is also my roommate, really is trying to do something to better it. But when we just pass legislation that I don't think that stands up to the test of time and to the courts, I think we're wasting our time, and we're also being unfair to people who should not be criminalized for certain things. And so I thought about what else could we do? And the only thing I could come up with, because I thought about with schools, you can keep people out of schools, but if you have a PTA meeting, they don't just say only the parents can come to the PTA meeting, or what it's called now, PTO or something, but when I was growing up, it was PTA. You can come to the school because you're a taxpayer. So if you're going to tell certain people who pay taxes or may not be paying taxes that they cannot, because I pay taxes, I can't come to a playground, then it needs to be based on something better than, well, the only thing we could think of is age, okay? I think that's not a good test at all. Also, when you look, so I thought of what else could be done. And the only thing that I've seen that worked with these kind of things, and we have them in some parks, is that we have privatization. We pay for, let people pay for, and they can be in the parks, because we have things that are private that you have to pay for to go into a forest park. You have a YMCA, a YWCA, I think, over in the 21st Ward. That's a no-no. Okay, and so if we want to do something like that, then I'm looking at raising the money and privatizing it, even if it's in the park, and then you're talking about, okay, we haven't spent taxpayer dollars, and we're not criminalizing people who haven't done anything. If I want to go to the playground, if they can say this all they want to, I'm going to go to it, and I will be a test if I have to, because I think this is just that wrong kind of legislation. And I think that people have to be very careful about getting rid of people's civil liberties, because it's always easy to get rid of somebody else's civil liberties that's not affecting you, but it's a real hard thing. People have to fight back. So I know what the legislation wants, but it doesn't get, because how do you prevent that person, even if you can prevent them from coming in the playground? If the playground stops at the end of my desk, there's nothing in that legislation that prevents the person from standing right outside of my desk and being right there. So I don't think that it's effective, and I think that if pressed, it will be overturned, and for that reason, not because I don't believe that the sponsor has a good intention, I will be voting against the legislation.
Okay. Alderman from the 8th.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. Yeah, I saw a 14-year-old kid hanging out at the playground today. And I was listening to him tell his other buds he had just gotten out of juvie hall. And the other kid said, well, what were you in for? He said, teeter-tottering. The other kid said, well, you know, they tossed me in for being on the monkey bars. And, but at least both of them got a little street credibility out of the whole situation. I know 14-year-olds don't carry driver's licenses because they don't have ID. I mean, you'd be incapable of trying to tell who's 12 and a half, who's 13, who's 14. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me to making criminals out of 13 and 14-year-olds. Obviously, if they're smoking pot or drinking beer or destroying the equipment, those laws are already on the books for us to address those problems with children who are doing that. And I'm sure that it happens in all of our communities from time to time. I don't know that this is all that well founded. I would agree with the Alderwoman from the first ward. When you put something in here, especially in bold because it was the change that we added, that not only is it, you know, if it's designated by the Division of Parks, with the approval of the aldermen. I mean, who are the aldermen? I mean, that's just a whim, you know. That's no objective standard to determining the public safety of our children, of our youth. I mean, I love all of you, but, you know, someone complains in your ward about kids hanging out, well, you just don't go make a law to get rid of the 14-year-olds or the 15-year-olds. You know, it's a very difficult thing to do on a going forward basis. I build playgrounds. I did Juanita Park for Juanita Doggett in the 8th Ward. It's a beautiful place. We just fixed it up. And yes, I do get the 15 or 16-year-olds, and it's designed in such a fashion that it's really not compatible because it's all fenced in for them to do something wrong and that the police show up. And that's the key. If they're doing something significantly wrong, you call the police. And that's my problem is the logic to say that the aldermen have a universal, you know, on their own whim, they can decide if over 13-year-olds can play there or not. I mean, in essence, what we're going to do is start citing all of our 13 and 14-year-olds for violations because that's what the law calls for. That doesn't make a lot of sense to start busting 13 and 14-year-olds for being on the playground. They might not be doing anything wrong, and yet they're guilty of an ordinance violation. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have that. And like I said, you know, juvenile detention, there's a lot of bad actors out there we could actually put in that are, you know, screwing up our neighborhoods instead of trying to run up some charges on some kids that are 12 and 13 years old. That's my feelings.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 24th.
The Alderman from the 6th yield to questions.
Alderman from the 6th, will you yield for questions to
I will.
Alderman from the 24th, please proceed.
Thanks. Can you tell us about some other municipalities who've enacted similar laws?
Absolutely. Miami Beach, Florida, New York City, and 2 small municipalities in California that I know of have instituted this. They've been in place for several years. I've contacted the Parks Department and the city attorneys in those offices, and they are, those ordinances are working well to deter adults from making it impossible for children to enjoy equipment that was designed for them. Playground equipment is actually, in most cases, designed for children who are 12 or under.
Do you think that a typical police officer can ascertain the difference between a 13-year-old child and a group of 35-year-old men hanging out on a playground?
I have a lot of confidence in the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department's ability to do that. And I would also like to add, I did forward this bill to the alderman from the 8th several times to get his opinion on it. I never heard back. If he would have had an opportunity to read it, he would have recognized that there is no penalization for children between the ages of 13 and 17. You may not get a ticket until you're 18 years of age.
Thank you for pointing that out. I was thinking about the same thing during his comments. So this bill won't provide any penalties to any teenager or any teenager under the age of 18, but it's aimed at basically groups of adults who are occupying space designed for children.
That's correct. And that is definitely what the aldermen who I know are supportive of this are interested in. As I mentioned before, I was originally going to try to pass legislation only for Fox Park, but other aldermen were interested in utilizing this in their parks. And this ordinance would be an opt-in, not an opt-out. It does not apply to all parks. It only applies to those parks where the community and the aldermen decide that there's an issue that rises to the cause.
Right. I'm reminded that one of our colleagues one time said that St. Louis can be a tough place to grow up sometimes, and I think that we don't always pay quite enough attention to quality of life for families with young children. And obviously we have a great park system, as you know, but it's not great if you're a mother and you can't use the facilities that were designed for your children. So I think this is a reasonable approach that I don't think will have deleterious effects. And I remember as a teenager, I had an ice house on a frozen lake in Minnesota, and we were out there and one evening, and the police came, and they made us get off the lake because we were out past the lake curfew or something. And it seems to me that a police officer can very easily say, hey guys, don't hang out here, without the suggestion that we'll be hauling kids off to jail is obviously erroneous. And I have a lot of faith that this can be managed in a very responsible way and in a way that provides benefits to families with children. So I think it's very reasonable, and I'll be voting yes on it.
Alderman from the 23rd.
Yeah, I stand opposed to it. I did submit about my feelings into the bill, which did help take away from the kids that are 13 to 16 wouldn't get cited, just asked to leave. I have problems, though, because my questions still are the chief of police and the police department in favor, and the answer is no. And the answer hasn't changed from that. The other thing, how are they going to distinguish which parks, we're going to hang big signs out? This is a children's only playground, this isn't. And then are we going to have people calling the police saying, calling 911 to say, hey, I think this kid could be 14 and should be thrown off, or even 17. I understand the intent of the bill, and I get it. I just don't think it's practical. I know that when we have older kids hanging out in the park, they're generally causing them some sort of mischief. People call me if that's the case, then we call the park rangers and we go over. And I generally go over with the park rangers. But to sit there and say, well, you know what, there's a kid trying to court his 17 or 18-year-old girlfriend, and of course I probably did that with my wife. We would swing on the swings and do cute stuff. I don't think that, anybody's would call the police on us. Again, I understand the intent of the bill, but I think it's not practical. And again, until the police department would get on board with it, other than a handful of select police, and I've asked this, I can't support the bill. If the police department gets on board and says, gee, this is something that we really need as a tool to work the parks in the city, I'd be on board, but not as it stands.
Alderman from the 21st.
I want to first say that I understand where the sponsor is coming from. I understand her goal and her intention. I'm sure these are good intentions. I oppose the bill because I believe the consequences, while perhaps unintended, could be negative, especially for young people in our community. We have there seems to be a good effort to make the city more attractive to certain demographics, to bike riders, to dog lovers. We roll out the red carpet to a lot of different groups, but it seems like for every bill we present to make it more attractive to certain groups, we introduce another bill somehow making it less attractive to young people, young African American boys especially. And I think those are the groups that are going to be most targeted by a bill like this. You know, I almost wish we had a rule down here that for every place we forbid young people to be, we had to also present a new opportunity for young people to be somewhere. We've made it now illegal for them to cruise. We are, you know, making it illegal for how they're dressed in certain instances. And now we're talking about they can get fined for just being in a public place. I'm not usually in the habit of supporting bills that limit my own rights. You know, this would make it even illegal for me, perhaps in the future, of, you know, walking in O'Fallon Park along a playground that I'm proud to have, you know, helped rehabilitate. And so I know that one of the caveats that was added to this bill to make it more palatable was to say that an alderman would have to opt in into this law. But this bill will be on the books forever in the city of St. Louis. And I don't plan to be an alderman forever. My son is 3 years old now. By the time he's 14 years old, perhaps there's another alderman representing an area that I now live. And I just, you know, I don't know who I would be more upset with if he came home with a ticket for being a 16-year-old hanging out in a park, doing no other illegal activity, but just, you know, being the wrong demographic in the wrong place. I don't think that's the right message to send to young people in the city. I told the sponsor that I would be more inclined to support the bill if it was even on a experimental basis, just in the particular park that is her concern. But to add the possibility that any park in the entire city of St. Louis, that we can have entire sections where taxpaying citizens could not be, or that young people could be penalized for doing nothing else, nothing illegal, besides just standing in the wrong place at the wrong time, I don't think is the right message to send to young people. I don't think that's a message of a supportive city. And so with that, I will be voting against the bill. But again, I completely understand the intention of the sponsor, and I support her in her efforts to make her park safe for folks. I just don't know if this is the right way to do it.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 3rd.
Mr. President, I have a question for the alderman who is primarily sponsoring this bill, and I wonder would she respond.
Alderman from the 6th, will you yield for question to
I
the
will.
Alderman? Alderman from the 3rd, please proceed.
Each park in the city is somewhat different, and I have a park right in front of my house, and oftentimes I hear a bunch of noise up there. I go up into the park to see what's going on, and I don't have my grandbabies with me. Now, if I go up there, there may be some police officers that may have a real problem with some aldermen, and you go up there, and here I am caught in the middle of this. What I wonder, would you mind having public hearings in the wards where you have these parks to find out how big that problem is? Because I think you're addressing perhaps one park where you've had some complaints from. So I think that if you talk to the aldermen that have parks in their wards, and let's see if there's a possibility that they would be amenable to calling public meetings, or we can do the public meetings over in 208, and then we have a, let's say we have a feel for what the majority of the people think and feel. But now having the police, because you've got a person that does not have a child walking through the park, see, and it's so much easier over there in the Hyde Park area. They could come down Farrar Street and walk right straight through that park, and that passes that playground. And sometimes what the kids are doing, they may stop and look, which creates a problem for maybe some police officer who that day may have the feelings that he needs to do something. Or it also could possibly be that here are people that are 18 years of age and go by, and some of those things that I have in my park for the kids to play on, they hang on it, they climb up the pole, and they slide down the slide. And sometimes that's kind of interesting to watch these small babies, and a lot of times I don't go over there to watch them, but when I hear too much noise, I go over there, and then I might look when one of them's climbing up this pole, and he may be 3 or 4 years old, and his mama's sitting over there, and I wonder why she would let that child climb 10 feet in the air to get on that slide that goes down when all he has to do is walk up the steps. See, but whenever you have children and you have something for them to do, and you think this is how they should do it, they're always going to find different ways. So the question is whether or not you would be amenable to holding some public hearings, because I certainly would like to have them in my ward to find out. But to pass this, and maybe there's a police officer that just, that day may not be feeling so well. And here these people walk through Hyde Park because, see, Farrar in my ward is split. And the park, in order to get to Farrar on the, I would say, on the west side of it, they have to walk through the park or walk all the way down to Salisbury and walk around the park, then back up again.
Can I answer your question?
Certainly.
Great, thank you for your comments, I appreciate it. And I think if you need to go across the street to your park, as long as you are not sliding down a slide or swinging when you're checking on where the noise is coming from, then you should be absolutely fine. And with respect to public hearings, the only reason I did draft this legislation so that other aldermen were able to opt in, because there was an interest on the part of other aldermen when I started discussing what I wanted to do for Fox Park.
Well, I think those aldermen that have parks in their ward, if they're concerned about it, let them call the meeting. I don't think we should call a meeting in another alderman's ward unless that alderman wants that, if he has a concern about it. And I certainly would love to have it, have that conversation with the people that live in the 3rd Ward, and particularly the Hyde Park area. I got 2 parks over there. I got one of them where 10, 11 o'clock at night, I call the police often, but they're not up in the park, but they're across the street from the park, hanging out, drinking beer. But they could be out breaking in cars and doing some things. But I would prefer, if you would be amenable, to having public hearings to find out what the aldermen in the various wards where they have a park, what they think, and what the people in that area would be willing to do. We may come up with some better ideas.
Okay, I'd like to request to move Board Bill 185 committee substitute to the informal calendar.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted.
Place Board Bill number 185 committee substitute back on the informal calendar.
So noted.
Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill 216, sponsored by Aldermen and Alderwomen. Alderman Kennedy, Williamson, French, Alderwoman Ingracia, Alderman Carter, Alderwoman Tyus, Alderman Arnowitz, and President Reed. An ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing a supplemental appropriation amending Ordinance 69432, commonly referred to as the City of St. Louis Annual Operating Plan for fiscal year 2013 through 2014, appropriating and reducing in the amount of $250,000 from the Water Division and containing an emergency clause.
Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on Board Bill number 216, the perfection.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, would you please place that on the informal calendar?
Madam Clerk, please make note of that change. Place Board Bill number 216 on the perfection informal calendar.
So noted. Board Bill 198, committee substitute, sponsored by Alderman Wessels, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing the mayor to submit
Some order.
a 2014 annual plan to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development to apply for funding under the Federal Community Block Grant Home Investment Partnership Emergency Solutions Grant and Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS Entitlement Programs containing an emergency clause.
Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill number 198, committee substitute.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for perfection of Board Bill 198, committee substitute.
Moved by the Alderman from the 13th, entertain a second on the motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 15th. Alderman, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Board Bill 198, of course, is our annual block grant bill. The breaks down as follows. There's $16.6 million in community development block grant, $2,260,000 in home funds, $1,157,000 in emergency shelter grant, and $1.25 million in housing opportunity for people with AIDS. As you all know, this is the process to get to this point this year is different from it has been in the past. And the reason for that is the Department of Housing and Urban Development told us it needs to be different. There were two main issues. One was the transfer of funds, and the other was ward balances. Transfer of funds, what was happening was that we would allocate money to various wards, and the alderman there would transfer money to some nonprofit public service groups. What this was doing was raising our balance way over the 19% cap that's allowed by HUD. That is 19% of this block grant money can be used for public services, and by those transfers, we were exceeding that amount by a whole lot. HUD noticed it. They said, we've got to use the money as efficiently as possible, and it needs to go to developing housing. And that's what we were doing, transferring money that was supposed to be used for housing production into our community organizations. That was one problem. The other problem was the ward balances. We had some wards that had ward balances of over $1 million. It's wrong, and HUD said it's wrong, and HUD said, you've got to utilize and the money not only as efficiently as possible, but with some speed. And we weren't doing that. So this appropriation bill is an attempt to rectify those problems. Not only this bill, but the process that was started back in July 1 when CDA opened this process up for applications from public services. It started then, and I would commend Joe Claiborne and the Community Development Agency for doing a fine job in this transition year from what we had been, the way we had been doing business and the way we're doing it now and the way we're going to do it in the future. I would be glad to try to answer any questions that anyone has on this bill. And with that, I will sit down and ask for your support.
Alderman from 24th, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. I echo the comments of the Alderman from the 13th. I think this is a very challenging transitional year. I think a lot of people worked diligently to make that transition. I think eventually we're going to come out of this in a better place, but without a doubt, there's some really tough decisions financially in this allocation. And I think we probably all agree that none of us in the room is 100% satisfied with the bill, but that's just how it is. And specifically within that public services segment, I think maybe that's where some of the toughest choices had to be made in the initial allocation. Now, I move we adopt amendment number 1 to the bill, which hopefully is on everybody's desks. It looks like this. Does everybody? It's been moved.
You want to read amendment number 1, kind of the high points so that they know what.
So I'll summarize the amendment by saying we're going to try to spread the pain around a little bit.
You have to, in the form of a motion, so that I can.
All right, I move we adopt amendment number 1 to board bill number 198, committee substitute. And we're going to, so pages A1 and A2, we're going to The first section is the original allocations, so we're at High Point.
He's doing the motion. I move that we adopt amendment number 1, just to make sure everybody understands exactly what amendment number 1 is, to Board Bill 198 Committee Substitute, pages A1, A2, striking out, the various different items and amending,
All right, High Point, 12,500. Community Education Centers, 180,000. City of St. Louis Building Division and Land Reutilization Authority for MLK pre-development, $1 million. Dutchtown South Community Corporation, 130,000. Hamilton Heights Neighborhood Organization, 130,000. Shaw Neighborhood Housing Corporation, 230,000. Skinker to Bolivar Community Council, 70. North Newstead Association, 150,000. Park Central Development Corp, 100,000. And add the following words. This is the, after the amendment, this is the allocation. Food Outreach, 30,000. The Spot, Washington University, 25,000. High Point Center, 60,000. Community Education Centers, 145,000. City of St. Louis Building Division and LRA for MLK pre-development, 972,500. Dutchtown South Community Corporation, 125,000. Hamilton Heights Neighborhood Organization, 125,000. Shaw Neighborhood Housing Corp, 225,000. Skinker to Bolivar Community Council, 65,000. North Newstead Association, 145,000. And Park Central Development Corporation, 85,000.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 24th. I entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 23rd. Any discussion? Thanks.
There are, the gist of this, so we need to point out that obviously in committee there was an amendment that reduced or eliminated funding for multiple organizations that had been funded in the original allocation. I think most notably High Point Center, Food Outreach, and the Spot, which Food Outreach and High Point Center are food support organizations. I'll talk about High Point Center. They've been around for about 35 years, and what they do is provide food to very, very low-income senior citizens and disabled individuals. And so, we all know SNAP benefits were reduced last week, and they may take an additional cut on the next federal budget. So there's a lot of news stories about the very large amount of people in St. Louis and the St. Louis region who rely on these supplemental nutrition programs. And if the bill stands as it came out of committee, we're going to eliminate 2 of those programs. 2 of those programs will not function. So there are a pretty big group of seniors and disabled individuals who rely on these programs for food who will not be able to go to these programs anymore. I think that is an important thing to remember. This is food aid to very low income, fixed income senior citizens and disabled individuals that will not exist if the bill passes as it came out of committee. Now, this amendment is an attempt to keep those organizations functioning, to keep them delivering that food assistance while also funding things that many other aldermen think are important, like community education centers and the CUBDOs. Now, it's really, I know it is a huge challenge for any of us to say, this is exactly what this organization deserves and this is exactly what that organization deserves. But the reductions in this amendment to the CUBDOs will ensure that all of those CUBDOs can still function. These are very small reductions to their allocations in order to continue this type of food aid and do some of the community education things which some of my colleagues think are very valuable. And so with that, I'll close or entertain questions.
All right. Alderman from the 23rd, you're recognized.
I just want to, I stand in support of this or any amendment we do on the floor today that puts back the money for food outreach and the High Point Center. When we start talking about neighborhood beautification versus feeding people, there's no comparison. When we talk about this affecting multiple neighborhoods, a little in each organization versus feeding people, I know there was a statement in the paper that the Board of Aldermen apparently put something together that takes money away from home, basically food services from people that need it. I can tell you I will oppose any amendment that doesn't have these things in it. I will support any amendment that gives back the money to the people that most need it. Without getting aggravated, if we don't take care of the least, we should be ashamed of ourselves.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 13th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the sponsor of this amendment yield?
Yes.
Alderman from the 24th, we yield to the Alderman. Alderman from the 13th, please proceed.
Thank you. A couple of questions. How much money, this is a $3.1 million budget in public services. How much money, what does this total, how much money will be left over on, before we reach the 19% cap?
My understanding is that the bill unamended has a $27,500 gap, so we're at about 18.9% compared to that 19% public services cap. And this moves $27,500 from outside the public service category into public services and gets us right to the limit of that 19% cap. Now, I think it's important to remember this is not the real allocation from HUD, from the federal government. This is an estimate of what they're going to give us. So the difference between 18.9% and 19% may not be relevant because the actual allocation may come in above or below this budget. And so this is CDA's best guess, but we know probably for sure that these won't be actually the exact final allocations because these will probably have to be adjusted based on our real allocation from HUD later this year or early next year.
What do you think will happen if it comes in below?
We know, look, we already know that the block grant has been cut, and I'm sure many people know this much better than I do, has been cut pretty substantially in recent years, and there are already a lot of organizations under duress because of that. We can't, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen if the
I know you
allocation
don't, but my question is, what will happen if it comes in below revenue estimate?
My assumption is that all of these organizations will take the same percentage cut. If we get 5% less from HUD, each of these organizations will take a 5% cut in their allocation, and it's my understanding that is generally how it's been done in the past. And so there are certainly, I can, just speaking to what I know, High Point Center in particular, a $60,000 allocation is already less than they have gotten in the past. So they're already right on the limit, and it'll hurt if it comes in below and they take another reduction. I'm sure it'll hurt some of these other organizations also.
Yeah, thank you. All right, you answered my question. This amendment more or less gets to where I wanted to go. It restores some important funding for some organizations that deal with the poor, and I'm disappointed that the committee chose to eliminate these services, and I think it's important that I have an amendment as well that would restore the same funding. A little bit different approach, but my concern is when you got a $3.1 million budget, which is what we have for public services. 1% of that is $31,000. So we had an estimate, a gap, let's say, of $27,500. Now we're using that completely. So we're really appropriating over 99% of the available funding. I think that's somewhat irresponsible, and we do this all the time. We see a little money. I'm surprised nobody's introduced a bill already to spend the tax revenue we got off the World Series, But that'll be next month, no doubt. And So I think it's, it's foolish to cut it this as close as we're cutting it by adding this $27,500. And I think it shows a sign of fiscal immaturity that we have down here. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion on amendment number 1? Alderman from the 24th, you recognize the close on amendment number 1.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not going to claim that the current allocation is perfect. I'm not going to claim that this is a perfect allocation. But I will argue that this is sort of a midpoint in a lot of ways between the initial allocation, which came from CDA, and the amended allocation that came out of the HUD's committee. And, I don't know that we're going to do substantially better. There is some complicated math when you start shifting money around from these organizations and trying to figure out, who it hurts the most, who it hurts the least, who needs the money the most. The fact is we don't know 100%. We're not sure. There's a lot of uncertainty here, but I think that this is an allocation that hopefully better represents what I think our collective values are about helping people who are really seriously in need for the most basic life essentials. So I hope my colleagues will support this. Thanks.
All right, thank you. There's been a request for roll call from the Alderman from the 19th. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. No. Alderman Ortman. No. Alderman Vollmer. Aye. Alderman Villa. No. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. No. Alderwoman Howard. No. Alderwoman Florida. No. Alderwoman Behringer. No. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. No. Alderwoman Davis. No. Alderman Schmid. Aye. Alderman French. No. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Aye. Alderman Cone. No. Alderman Williamson. No. Alderman Carter. No. Alderwoman Cruzen. Aye. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Moore. No. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Arnowitz. No. Alderman Rhodey. Six aye votes, 20 no votes, 1 present and 1 abstain.
By a vote, you fail to sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 24th. Alderman from the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would like to move to suspend our rules so that every cent of profit generated from the recent World Series goes to the 11th Ward.
Alderman from the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. President.
We'll have to rule that motion out of order. Alderman from the 25th. You recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today with a second amendment to this bill. It's actually relatively similar, although not entirely, to the last amendment that was introduced. I know that this is an extremely complicated and very personal issue for many of us down here. We are talking about, those neighborhoods and those people who are most in need in our communities and here in the city. They're passing out the amendment right now, which is why I'm filling in with.
You're talking about the bill itself and not the amendment. Yeah, keep your comments to the bill itself.
I'd like to submit amendment number 1 for consideration, Mr. President. Or amendment 2, my apologies.
Could you?
I'd like to move for consideration of amendment number 2.
Been moved by the Alderman from the 25th, seconded by the Alderman from the 24th. Alderman from the 25th, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've had a number of discussions over the last week and a half since this passed out of committee with various members of the administration, with your office, with a number of my colleagues. And it truly has been a very painful process, indeed, for I think many of us. And, my position on this has been, I think that there are organizations that, truly do an amazing job serving our communities. And unfortunately, those were somehow overlooked through the committee process. And there's also a number of organizations that serve our neighborhoods. And when we talk about the poor and the needy in this community, our neighborhoods are representative of those as well. And a lot of these neighborhood organizations that are funded through this bill also provide services to those in our communities. And I, for one, have seen and have been a part of the Dutchtown South Community Corporation for a number of years. I served on their board before getting elected as alderman. I know my colleague from the 20th Ward has been involved with them for a very long time as well. And my colleague from the 9th and others have been too. And we've witnessed over the years these organizations, their budgets, shrinking, and unfortunately their service areas growing more and more in need. And the way that this funding is being allocated this year, really does provide for critical services that are important to our communities. One of which I'm particularly proud of within the Dutchtown neighborhood, has been the neighborhood ownership model. And the funding for Dutchtown South, a good part of that will go to support the efforts of the neighborhood ownership model within our community. And neighborhood safety is certainly something that's very much on the top of mind for me and my constituency, and it's very frustrating when when this bill was introduced in its original format, that organization was going to be receiving a cut, and to further cut into our neighborhood organizations and their budgets is really a shame. And so, upon some conversation here on the floor, I am submitting this amendment for consideration by my colleagues with hopefully favorable consideration that would restore funding, at least partially, for food outreach, the Spot, and High Point Center. And also, it would restore funding for the community education centers. It will not restore it at what was passed out of committee, but the community education centers were originally recommended for no funding, which I have been a supporter of community education centers for as long as I've been an alderman, and even before then. I attend their meetings when I can, and participate in events and activities when I can as well. And then it would restore. Well, it would not take away funding from many of our neighborhood organizations, which the previous amendment would have. And so with that, I stand for questions.
All right. Any questions on amendment number 2? Any discussion on amendment number 2? Alderman from the 25th, you're recognized to close on amendment number 2.
I renew my motion for amendment number 2 and ask for favorable consideration from my colleagues.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt amendment number 2. There's been a request from roll call from the Alderwoman from the 19th. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. No. Alderman Ortman. No. Alderman Vollmer. Aye. Alderman Villa. No. Alderman Arnowitz. No. Alderman Wessels. No. Alderwoman Howard. No. Alderwoman Florida. No. Alderwoman Behringer. No. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. No. Alderwoman Davis. No. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. No. Alderman Boyd. No. Alderman Vaccaro. Aye. Alderman Ogilvie. Aye. Alderman Cone. Aye. Alderman Williamson. No. Alderman Carter. No. Alderwoman Cruzen. Aye. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Moore.
No.
Alderman Rhodey. Nine aye votes, 17 no votes, 1 present, 1 abstain.
By a vote, you failed to sustain the motion, Alderman from the 25th. Now what's before us is the perfection of Board Bill 198 Committee Substitute. Any discussion on that Board Bill? Any further discussion on Board Bill 198 Committee Substitute? Alderman from the 23rd?
It's going to be, no, like that. I'm going to have this printed, but I'm going to make an amendment number 3.
Do you want to discuss the Board Bill right now? Do you want to?
No.
While that's being.
No, I just want to make sure that my
You
amendment.
may want to
gets-
discuss the Board Bill, otherwise you're going to be out of time here in a second. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 24th.
Let's discuss the board bill. Look, the board bill allocates a total of, I think, over $18 million, $2.2 million to home funds, as well as $16.6 million to a variety of other services. And as we all know, there were some difficult choices to make. You know, one thing I was actually particularly interested in discussing, and which hasn't really come up so far, is the $1 million to the LRA for Martin Luther King corridor pre-development is how that's tagged. It'd be interesting to have a conversation about what that means, because I think it means demolition, as far as I can tell. That's been the other word that's been used in relation to that line item. So, I mean, I would love to hear from one of my colleagues what that actual program is, since that's a pretty large allocation out of this budget when there are a lot of tough choices. I wonder what that means. It may be very valuable, but I think we should have had a discussion about you know, how LRA intends to use that funding, especially because, you know, there are actually a lot of other demolition initiatives out there potentially, other sources or other ways being considered to increase demolition funding. Does everybody have that amendment on their desk?
I'm sorry, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Alderman from the 23rd.
I'm actually discussing this. I may pull my amendment out for the minute because someone else is telling me they're going to make an amendment.
All right, we're moving.
So it would be.
Alderman from the 23rd, if you want to make an amendment, you can make the amendment. If not, when we move, I'm going to recognize the Alderman from the 13th to close,
okay, now.
because there hasn't been any further discussion. So are you offering an amendment?
Not at this minute.
All right, Alderman from the 13th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to offer I want to offer amendment number 3, which is on the desk, probably identified, I don't know, it's probably identified as number 1. It's the one you, this, so I move for adoption of amendment number 3.
Alderman from the 13th, can you give us an overview of the top of that amendment so we know what it looks like?
This would, yes, thank you. The first item at the top is Community Education Center, $180,000. Supplemental Nutrition and Social Service Referral Program at High Point, $12,500. Okay.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 13th. I entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 9th. Alderman from the 13th, please proceed with amendment number.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment would cut out the funding of $180,000 for community education. It would add funding, $60,000 for the High Point Center, $42,500 for nutritional services, $40,000 for the SPOT, and $50,000 for DeSales Community Housing Corporation. You know, community education probably at one time was a good idea and an effective way to provide some services to the public. But there are so many other opportunities now, just in the last few years. For instance, the Northside Community Center is open. There are all sorts of programs that the Y provides up there, as well as other the other organization that has a contract at the North Side facility and the South Side. You know, in many cases, they're providing the same services that the community education programs provided years ago, and in some cases provide some yet today. The funding for community education, you know, was $800,000 from block grant just 4 years ago, and of course that was matched by the Board of Education. So last year it was about $327,000 came out of block grant. There was some money transferred by some of the aldermen, and I think it reached about $390,000 or so. But my point is, this program or these programs have had substantial decreases in funding. It has affected what they can provide and how they provide it. I'll give you one example. Years ago, just a few years ago, the community eds in our area anyway sent out a mailer once or twice a year telling people what programs they had. When their funding got cut, they eliminated that. They said, well, people can find our programs on a website. You know, how many people are going to go to the Board of Education website to find out what programs community education offers at Long School? The result of that is there's just fewer and fewer participants in these programs citywide. So, you know, I think if it was a good idea 20 or 30 or 40 years ago, but it's something that's really outlived its usefulness. I think most of us understand that, and this would provide $180,000 in funding for some organizations that are really helping the poor, helping the indigent, helping those that deserve help. So I ask for your support of amendment number 3.
Any further discussion on amendment number 3? Any further? Alderman from the 20th.
Mr. President, am I on? Mr. President, members of the board, obviously it's indeed a difficult situation. You know, it harkens back to a time with one of those scenarios where you're told that you have 10 people in a boat and there's only provisions for 5. And so perhaps things are being said sort of in their head, but in their heart, I'm not sure that they exactly feel that way, and I hope that's the case. I do not have a community education center in my ward. The closest ones are Bevo Long, Carondelet Blow. I think there's one over west of Grand. But we were just talking earlier, and we had differences of opinion, but I think everybody's heart was in the same place in terms of the importance of having things for youth. And the sponsor of the one bill was hoping that we would make sure that children had access to the playground. In another circumstance, other people had the feeling that we were short-circuiting yet other youths who were older who might also want to have access to opportunities. The community education centers are not perfect. This city's not perfect. Many of us, all of us, I include myself, are not perfect. However, we have a lot of students and also families who do have opportunities to attend these community education centers. I supported some of the earlier amendments because I felt that we were spreading out the pain of some of those cuts. What this does essentially is, once again, we are sending a notice to our education centers, to our children, to our families, that we are choosing for all of the pain to be on them. I hope that we would not do that. Obviously, I supported earlier the nutritional services, aid services, people who are truly in need. But another thing that's been occurring, and I've been talking about this for a while recently, is the fact that we take care of everyone who's doing the best in our society, and we also take care sometimes of those who are at the lowest end, who are struggling. But we don't take care a lot of times of all the folks in the middle. I think that our community education centers, while they're not perfect, and I think that we should hold them to a standard of showing with data that they are helping these children and these families, that they do provide help to a lot of those folks in the middle. And I know that a number of people down here, including some people who have already spoken on this amendment, have dedicated their lives to children and families. I know that. So I know that this is pretty much just a calculation, mathematical, and I just hope we won't do this mathematical calculation. The other thing is, we have the Proposition S monies where, in addition to block grant funding, we have said as a community that we believe that, and I hate this terminology, but they say children at risk. They're all children. All of us are at risk at some point in our lives, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe yesterday. But we believe that we don't have enough services already, so taking out this very basic safety net, I believe, is also a mistake. Here's the other reason why this is a mistake. If we put in $180,000 to these community education centers, that will double to $360,000 because this is a partnership. This is a partnership between the city and St. Louis Public Schools. That partnership does not exist necessarily in all of these services. So maybe we should go back and look at some of these other amendments. I don't know. I don't think there's a statute of limitation on those. But I think it truly would be a mistake, even though, yes, I believe that these food services are very important. Yes, I believe the HIV services are very important. I also think that our kids are very important. I think that our families are very important. I think there's a lot of struggle going on in this town and a lot of things that we say about education and about our city. And I think that this would be a terrible message to send about our children and about education if we were to do this. Even though mathematically it may make sense, I think at the end of the day it makes no sense.
All right, Alderman from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the comments of the aldermen. My concern with funding community schools is that they've repeatedly shown us through community development block grant funds and Prop S funds that they may not, in fact, need the money as much as they say they do. It's my understanding, based on documentation I've received from CDA and from Charlene Deacon in Public Safety, that not only have there been many times where they haven't utilized all the money that's been awarded to them, but the city has come back time and time again to ask them to submit their receipts to be reimbursed. And coming from a background where I worked for nonprofits and did grant writing, an organization that you are willing to give money to and doesn't expend the money, and then you have to seek out them to submit receipts would no longer be funded after several years of doing this. So while I do support the idea of supporting community education, I think that SLPS is able to handle that on its own.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Community education centers are not just about youth. They're about the entire city. They're about the community as a whole. You will find senior citizens there. You will find business people there. You will find small businesses who are coming there, learning new tools, new ideas. You find communities working together. Aside from the fun things that are done with the after-school programs, you have your GED programs operating out of there and a number of other entities. To give you for an example of a community education center that did a lot for a neighborhood like Hyde Park, Clace Elementary School was one of the worst elementary schools we had on the face of the earth, not just the city of St. Louis. But community ed turned that school around because it brought the community in. It created every kind of program you could think of for every facet of that neighborhood to participate in, and then even extended to the business community, where we now still have a component that supports that community that Mallinckrodt created based on the community ed model. If we do that and continue to do that and form and strengthen the partnerships, as I stand up and say all the time, educate your population, bring together partnerships, establish needs, and make sure that other resources are brought to them. And that's what happens with community education centers. They're not doing all that on their own. There are a lot of partners involved there. When you go to that dinner, you see the small businessman and the large businessman there. You see grandma there. You see the married couple there. You see the young college student there who comes and volunteers for tutoring programs. It is more than just something that the St. Louis Public Schools can do on their own. Because if that was the case, so many people in this city would not be involved in it. Now, the St. Louis Public Schools have done their due diligence based on the loss of population in the city of St. Louis and the loss of students enrolled, and reduced the number of community education centers. They've also created some that are part-time centers and some that are full learning centers. So they are doing their part in this partnership. But as I have said to many other entities, we are going to have to reinvent ourselves, and we're going to have to also find new ways of funding. So I was very clear to the superintendent and those who represent him. This will not be the place that we will find money all the time. And we know that from this point on. But I'm not going to throw them under the bus this year and just leave them out there hanging. And to clarify and clear up, their fiscal year operates different from our fiscal year. And so there's always a problem in getting all that balanced at the right time, which was stated, I believe, by two representatives at our committee hearing when they presented all this to us. The question was asked of John Wyndham. The question was answered by John Wyndham and was answered by Jill. So there are a lot of other things involved with all of this. And yes, we may have a center that didn't get all their paperwork in on time and you had to go back and ask for it. But I guarantee you there's not one city department that you can't say at some point in time was late on their budget information. You cannot say there's not a corporation out here that didn't turn in their taxes on time. There's a whole lot of reasons why people don't get what they need done on a specific moment. But as a whole, that is a good operation. I believe in it. I've seen it turn people's lives around. I've seen it change communities. They became safer. People got more focused on education. We took moms who had dropped out of school, got them back in school, all kinds of things. They started community gardens out of CECs. The first one that was done in Hyde Park was done at the CEC. So I'm telling you, it's just a lot of things that you may not know about them, but you need to know. And so if we're going to do this, we had a bill, it came out of committee. We even took time in committee and took a break and said, if you got an idea, let's talk about it, try to work it out. And you didn't do it then. We got a bill that we're working with. Let's just get this job done and move on today. Thank you.
Alderwoman Alderwoman from the 1st, you're recognized.
Mr. President, members of the board, I don't have a community school in my ward, but I do support the concept. I support the concept for many of the things that the Alderwoman from the 19th has said. I also want to just add a little other thing about the school boards being able to fund things. Our public schools are not funded properly under the foundation formula. If we were funded properly, maybe we wouldn't be here trying to do these partnerships like that. But we already don't get the money that we're supposed to. And I spent 2.5 years as an attorney at the Juvenile Detention Center for the Public Defender's Office. And I want to tell you, I would put money in to schools any day over funding in the back doorway is when the children are in trouble, or older people, because I also did felonies. This is a small amount of money, as the Alderwoman has already said from the 19th, to do wonderful things in the community. And even though you don't have one maybe in your ward, you may not even know what constituents of yours are being helped by these programs. I agree with her when she talks about that you don't always get your ducks in order and the money that's being spent. And sometimes you might want to try to save some money for something that's a little larger, and you may want to carry over a little money. It's not the amount of money that I saw was not a large amount that would have made a big difference anyway. And I know that we all get monies to do different programs in our ward, capital improvement, and sometimes we carry it over for something that we need to do that's for a bigger program. And I am just saying that this is a very good program. Education is always the way to go before incarceration. And I always have people who say to me about, well, you're giving this money to the schools and I have to vote for this tax. And I always say, but you don't vote for when we build new jails. Nobody says anything at all. We promote building new jails. We ought to be promoting education, and education comes in all forms and fashions. And as we have people coming here from other cities and things, they can utilize these, other countries, they can often utilize these community schools. It is a good program. It does not deserve to be cut. I mean, I think that the testimony at committee was, it was cut like from what, 350 to 185 and then down to nothing. That's horrible. That is horrible. We're talking about speaking to other programs, and they're all worthy programs. But education, there are two things. If you don't have your health and you're not educated, you're in trouble.
Any further discussion on amendment number 3? Alderman for the 20th.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify a couple things in terms of what was said. Number one, and I'll reemphasize this part, it's community education. It's a partnership. And so if we take out the community part, then they're education centers. St. Louis Public Schools already operates education centers. They believe, because we've told them since 1968, when this partnership began, that we wanted to have community education centers. If we don't fund it, they are not going to put additional funds there, because obviously they can always find additional things to do with that money for those same children. But there's been a belief that we've supported over that time that was important. Second thing is that, and I know my colleague from the 6th Ward talked about the community education schools. We do not, Roosevelt does not get any community education funds. However, there is an individual, Walter Gibson, who is the coordinator over at Siegel, who does work at Roosevelt and enables us to have some of that structure and fiscal support with regard to the record keeping and making sure that people are getting paid even though we're getting monies elsewhere. So there's a whole lot of sort of unintended consequences that could come from this. If we take away this funding, what that means, if we do that, what it means is that all of the community education centers will not be open next year. St. Louis Public Schools has said this is a partnership. They're happy to be part of that partnership. It is not a single proprietorship, and therefore it will not exist.
Any further discussion on amendment number 3? Any further discussion on amendment number 3? Alderman from the 28th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the Alderman from the 20th yield?
You mean from the 20th? Alderman from the 20th, please proceed.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. So I believe what you just said is that the school district said that they will close this program if they don't get this money? Did you
No,
say that?
what they have said is that they will match, for community education centers, they will match whatever funding is coming from block, or, from this
Right.
current funding stream. And that's what they have historically done. That's a special administrative board, and that's how they functioned, yes.
So that says to me that they don't think that this program is very important?
No, they believe that it is important on a 50-50 basis to have community and education. They already fund education, but we told them for many years that we wanted this community aspect of it. It includes advisory boards who are real people in the community who help design what is needed at those locations. I mean, it's been a whole fabric that sometimes is torn because people have not made the right decisions, but largely works because it's that democratic process and getting people engaged in what's going on at those centers.
And so does that mean that they will only fund up to this program up to the extent of what we put in through block grant and their match? So could they really do anything effective with $360,000 if they're matching 180 and 180? I mean,
I believe that that's their intent. They may not be able to keep the full complement of 10 centers open. They are already down on some of those centers, I think, to having a few that are part-time.
I think they
as
have
well.
4 full-time
Right.
and 3 part-time, if I
Something like
remember the
that.
testimony
Yeah. So
correctly.
it just keeps changing, and I'm sure they'll try to do the best that they can, but they're looking at this as that continued partnership.
Thank you.
Sure.
Alderman from the 21st.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of St. Louis Public Schools. I think it's a great program that's been around for many decades, and it is one of the few things on this list of funding recommendations that we actually double our money on. So for every dollar we put in, we get somebody else to also put in a dollar. And as was mentioned by the Alderman from the 20th, it also works the other way. So for every dollar we cut, that's also cutting an additional dollar from this program. Look, I think the committee spent a lot of time looking at lots of documents, and the recommendations that came out of the committee was based on a lot of input from people who came to testify in front of the committee. I don't know if this floor is the appropriate place to start moving around funds without the additional information that committee members were available to the committee members. This passed out of committee almost unanimously, the bill as it is presented to us today. I understand that in any budgeting situation, it becomes a balancing act between priorities, and there's always some losers. But today, I don't think that we should make a massive cut to a program that affects children in our communities. One of the fairer programs in the package that's actually spread out across the city so that every region in the city actually benefits from this program. And again, it's an area where we can actually double our investment, which is one of the principles that HUD suggested with the city of St. Louis, that we need to make investments that actually leverage this money so we get a bigger bang out of it. And this is one of the best examples of that in the package. So I would hope that we would vote this amendment down and pass the bill as is. I think we've all been here quite a while.
All right. Any further discussion on amendment number 3? Any further discussion on amendment number 3? Alderman from 13th, you recognize to close on amendment number 3.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple of points. The last time I looked, and I admit it's been a few years ago, the Board of Education budget was roughly equivalent to our general revenue budget, the city. You know, we're talking like, at this point, it's probably $400 or $500 million. Please let me finish. And if they're interested in this program, it would certainly be easy enough for them to take $1 million out of their hundreds of $1 million budget and fund this program independently. They haven't chosen to do that at this point because we continue to put block grant money in. If this block grant money that really, ideally, would be going to housing production. The, so I would, and when the superintendent came to testify on this bill, he didn't say if we didn't pass this, if we didn't put money into it, it was gone. He was quite clear. He left the door open. So I would, I think there's a better use of funds, and that's why I'm offering this amendment. As far as programs for youth, let me give you a few that are in the budget this appropriation bill we're going to pass or perfect today. Big Brothers and Big Sisters, $100 grand. Expanded recreational programs, $318,000. Out-of-school youth development at Herbert Hoover, $100 grand. Northside After School, Northside Community Center, $27,500. Youth Services, Al Chapel Community Center, $35,000. So, to say that, and you all know that there's a lot more programs than that out there. So to say that we're, and many of the services that those groups provide are similar to or equivalent to what community education does or has done in the past when they really flourished. So with that, I would ask for your support on amendment number 3. Thank you.
It's been moved by the Alderman from 13th, seconded by the Alderman from 23rd, that we adopt amendment number 3. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. No. Alderman Ortman. No. Alderman Vollmer. Aye. Alderman Villa. Aye. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Aye. Alderwoman Howard. Aye. Alderwoman Florida. Yes. Alderwoman Behringer. Aye. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. No. Alderwoman Davis. No. Alderman Schmid. No. Alderman French. No. Alderman Boyd. No. Alderman Vaccaro. Aye. Alderman Ogilvie. Aye. Alderman Cone. Aye. Alderman Williamson. No. Alderman Carter. No. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
No.
Alderwoman Flowers. No. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Florida. Alderman Rhodey.
Alderman from 16.
It's 10. 15 no votes. 10 aye votes, 15 no votes, 1 abstain.
By a vote, you fail to sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 13th, and amendment number 3 dies. Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move we adopt Amendment 4 to Board Bill 198 Committee Substitute.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 24th. I entertain a second on it.
Thank you.
And seconded by the Alderman from the 20th.
Okay, this is the most straightforward of the 4 amendments we've looked at so far. It makes 2 allocation changes. It takes $25,000 out of community education and $25,000 from Park Central and reallocates them to the High Point Center for a total of $62,500. I believe there is a typo on the bottom. It says 65. It should say $62,500. Hopefully the clerk will accept that as a typo. So when we embarked on this, the new way of allocating this money, we went to an application system and a scoring system. So High Point scored 74 on CDA's scoring system. The CECs scored 56, and Park Central for this activity, for the life and employment skills, scored a 50. So in the application, High Point scored substantially higher than either of those organizations. Let's talk about their budgets now. CECs are partially funded by SLPS, which Alderman from the 13th mentioned. SLPS's budget, I don't know exactly what it is. I think it's in the $250 million range. So the community education programs can be funded. We're not taking all their money away. They'll still have a $155,000 allocation. Park Central's budget. Park Central serves one ward, and they have multiple funding streams. They get block grant money, they get money from Barnes, and they get money from developers' fees from projects in the 17th wards. Their budget is on the order, according to their tax return, which I looked at this morning, of about $450,000 a year. So moving $25,000 from them to High Point would be about a 6% cut that will not have a deleterious effect on their operations. Their budget changes every year because they have different developers' fees every year. This is what it will do. This is what it will do. It will allow High Point Center to continue to feed low-income seniors and the disabled. And these other programs can continue to operate. What we get with this amendment is 3 functional programs that all do different things. Park Central primarily does development, planning work, and some employment training through this money. CECs do a variety of things for children and adults. And High Point Center has a very narrow focus on feeding the elderly and the disabled. And they have a good track record with CDA of complying with the rules that CDA provides for them on how they spend money. They're a quiet organization. They just do their thing. You don't hear about them, but they are an effective organization, and there are many low-income people who rely on them for food each week. We can have 3 functional programs. If you vote for this amendment, we will have 3 functional programs. Park Central will not be negatively impacted by this. There is a big opportunity for SLPS to continue to fund the CECs, and we will have a functional High Point Center which feeds the elderly. If you vote no on this amendment, High Point Center will go out of business, despite the fact that CDA wanted to fund them. They won't be there, and this resource for St. Louis City seniors and the disabled will be gone. So we cast this vote. Please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Alderman from the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. President. To inquire the Alderman from the 24th.
Alderman from the 24th, will you yield for question to the Alderman from the 11th?
Yes.
Alderman from the 11th, please proceed.
Alderman, the Alderman from the 21st a few minutes ago referred to winners and losers. I'm one of the losers this morning. with Crown Island Community Betterment
I
Federation.
would never say that about you.
A big-time loser. So, excuse my sarcasm, but you're telling me that this point system was not a hand-rub piano? That's an old term, but...
Yeah.
So the point system, some people's points aren't as good as other people's points because points are a vague term that really count for points.
I didn't grow up with any kind of piano, Alderman Villa. This is what I think. This is what I think. We have to have, look, we're going to a system that has some kind of criteria. What the criteria is always, up for dispute. But there were a lot of folks who spent a lot of time developing the criteria, asking and helping these organizations to apply using that criteria, and then they scored them. So at least we have some consistent reference point, which we did not have before. And is the criteria partially arbitrary? I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's partially arbitrary, but it's better than a totally arbitrary system. And in the HUD's committee, the reallocations, you could argue, are arbitrary. We took money from an organization that scored higher that CDA said we should fund because this...
That's shocking, gentlemen, but go ahead.
I think you get my point.
I do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Alderman from 25th, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to inquire of my colleague from the 24th Ward.
Alderman from 24th, will you yield? Please proceed.
It was mentioned in earlier discussion that one of the programs, and actually one of the programs that you're proposing to cut, gets a dollar for dollar return, and likewise, the converse is true as well. I'm just curious with the High Point, are there other resources or financial contributions that are also impacted by this if CDA does not fund the organization? Or is CDA funding the only resource that's made available to this organization to do what they do?
No, CDA funding is not the only resource they have, but it's roughly half of the money they have available. And that money goes to things you can imagine, like transportation of the food, rent, utilities, and they're very small part-time staff that are not paid very much money, but they need that staff to manage the program. Now, they also get a lot of food donations, right? They get, that's not cash income, but it's donated to them, and that is another, if you assign a dollar value to that, that accounts for a lot of their funding also. So what we'll lose is they'll cease to exist, and the value of all that food will go someplace else, but it won't go to this organization, and it may not go to this organization's service area. There will be a lot of people who have relied on this organization for a long time who do not have good other options. They don't have transportation options. They don't, they're going to be surprised when they show up one day and this organization just isn't there to fill that critical gap.
Thank you. I think that's important to note. I think also, the last three amendments, if I'm reading them correctly right now, most of these are here trying to restore the funding for High Point, but they're also trying to include the original recommendations for food outreach and also for the spot. I was one of the folks that stood and offered an amendment to do such a thing, in part because those organizations provide not only sustenance to those in need, but also the spot is, probably one of the more better performing, ventures in the city that helps youth and not only provides them with a safe space, but also provides them with health screening services and things of that nature. And, they provide youth services to not only the folks at their facility, which is located over in the Central West End Forest Park Southeast area, but also to kids in my community as well. I have a lot of kids in 63118, 63111, and 63116 that also participate in activities over there. So I'm very frustrated by this. I do think that this amendment, however, it's only providing support to High Point, But in my opinion, that is an organization, to my understanding as well, and if you can confirm this, that is the only one of those three that has historically been receiving CDA funding. Is that true?
I can't speak to the other organizations. They have historically received funding. I mean, I agree with you. Look, the First Amendment I sponsored funded food outreach and funded the spot also. So we don't disagree. But what I'm saying here is that we have a choice in this vote of having 3 functional organizations provide services to residents that are different, or we can have 2 of those organizations provide services. I'll take 3. And I hope everyone agrees with that.
Yeah, I rise in support of this as well, only for the fact that while I really would like to see funding go to the spot and to food outreach, I think that it's critical that organizations that have been relying upon this in the past, continue to receive it, especially when they rank high, with their CDA application and whatnot. And Mr. President, I close my questioning. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from 24th, you recognize to close on amendment number 4.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll just ask again for everyone's favorable consideration.
All right, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 24th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. We adopt amendment number 4. All in favor signify by saying. Been a request for roll call. All right. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Be sure you guys will wait.
Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Present.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Moore. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Rhodey. Four aye votes, 20 no votes, 1 present, 1 abstain.
By a vote, you fail to sustain the motion. The Alderman from the 24th and amendment number 4 dies. Now we're back to the perfection of Board Bill number 198, committee substitute. Alderman from the 11th, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. To speak against the proposed committee substitute, Mr. President, I don't have the date, but if you listen to this quote, it will tell you a little bit something. We're expecting performance. Congress is expecting performance. Now, this was stated by the lady that oversees the local HUD office. What? So Congress, which is certainly not a hand-rub piano, they're expecting performance because we were somehow or another lately not doing the right thing with these HUD funds. I was told to attend a meeting by the chairman of the Housing Committee some months ago, and I went to that meeting and a lot of us showed up, And then I was told by the alderman from the 13th to attend the second meeting. And I attended that one. And to be perfectly honest, I walked out of both of those meetings thoroughly confused. And I went back to the Crown Lake Community Betterment Federation, and I said, "Boy, there's a train coming, and it's a confusing train." So, having said that, I'm not necessarily in love with this new application process. I don't think that the shift away from most of our neighborhood programs makes a great deal of sense. I think it's stupid. I will tell you that CCBF has served our community for some 40 years. The Sisters of St. Joseph of Cronlet have poured multiples of millions of dollars in our neighborhood, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, we were told they were ineligible for funding, and this was the first week in October. So for whatever reason, and again, I don't want to badmouth Room 200, but I have asked two different people, two different times, that I'm a grown man, just tell me what we did wrong in an attempt to hopefully rectify it so I could get up this morning and play the amendment game. See, I'm mad. I didn't get to play the amendment game, keep sticking CCBF in these lines, because they told me if CCBF gets any money, then we're going to give it to them anyway. Keep in mind, and some of you may know this, but there was a time when our housing committee, and some of us had this conversation yesterday, everybody wanted to be on the housing committee. I was fortunate enough to have the office that our president holds right now, and our housing committee, we were splitting up 2.5 times this money, and everybody wanted to be on housing for the very reason that the block grant was kind of a beef tenderloin, so to speak. I know that was probably a terrible system. I certainly love the formal rating sheets and the competitive scoring. Come on. We all know, I mean, that's folly. You call it what you want, but somebody's points are more valuable than other people's points, and that pretty much makes this whole process, I think, folly. And again, some of my colleagues here, and more power to you. Let me just read from an article that says, the new budget reflects an approach, gone are the days when aldermen can carve up the federal funds. Well, you all ought to be ashamed of yourself. I mean, that's what we did, isn't it? And if you don't fight for your ward, I would have less respect for you. That's what we do. That's what we do. But in this particular instance, and again, I applaud them, I guess, in the Housing Committee, as long as the representative from the mayor's office was in on the meeting, and the members that wanted to move money around were in on the meeting, they're happy. They're the winners. We're about to take the federal money. And we all know that, I mean, I don't know that we should take any particular directions from Congress on anything. I think that we should be mad at HUD. And again, I am just hopeful, Mr. President, Dan, on a positive note, that next year that everybody will be more familiar with this process. And I guess I thought I'd never say this, but maybe in my wildest dreams, we will evolve to the point where a point will be a point. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Thank you. There's been some clapping up in there. You probably didn't hear that, but there was some clapping up there. Alderman from the 8th, you recognize.
Morning, Mr. President, members of the board. I do agree with the alderman from the 11th ward, because I knew this was a train wreck last summer, and whoever that, I can't remember, the professor from UMSL, I made him tour the neighborhoods that surround me to see what we could do with $62,000 a year with a housing corporation. The federal bureaucrats have no clue. They don't live here. They're not part of our neighborhoods. And there are a lot of programs in the city that have worked very well, and there's a lot of programs, apparently, that did not work very well. But, they've got the money, they're the bureaucrats, they're the ones that change these housing corporations that, if they are left, they're not doing the same thing that they used to do. And I mean, I think that all of our residents have to understand, this was a train wreck. And you know me, I would normally come down here and fight any train hurtling down the track for any of you, for anything I believed in. But this was one I knew I couldn't stop. And we pulled a bunch of groups and neighborhoods together to get applications in. I would normally fight everything. I don't think those bureaucrats have a clue of what we've accomplished in a variety of neighborhoods and a variety of housing corporations and a variety of things. But for the last 20 years, we've known, and we've continued to tell, all of the communities that this money was eventually going to go away and to start looking for alternative sources of income. Well, that day is here today. I know the feds, their perspective is it's housing dollars, and, they look at the programs that we've been funding down here. It's housing and urban development. And I know that all of these programs that have been funded, would be funded, some of them have absolutely nothing to do with housing. And we should go after other sources of income for some of these groups, these social groups, or social welfare organizations that do really help our constituents. But this is a train wreck coming because they're going to change their outlook. And if they're wrong, we and your community all suffer going forward. They don't understand it. They don't live here. They don't see the good results. I know we've had bad results in the city, but they don't see the good results. And he who controls the purse strings makes the rules. And they have the purse, and they're setting the rules. And so that's what we got to follow. We got to do the best we can for our community, and hopefully at some point in time, these people that are making these decisions for us, they clearly see what more we could do with well-placed funds.
Alderman from the 23rd, you're recognized.
Just like I said at the beginning, I'm not going to support this because it doesn't support the least people that need help. I hope and pray that in E&A that you guys straighten this mess out.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further? Alderman from the 2nd.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Let me make a little adjustment here. I'll let him speak first. So. Okay, I'll take my heel off. Okay. I rise in opposition to this board bill. I think this will be the first time I've actually voted against a block grant bill. And my organization is not in this bill, and that's okay. I fought as hard as I thought I could, and I do know that Riverview West Florissant has done a lot for the community in the last 10, 11 years. Now, my problem isn't the board bill or the money. To me, it's pennies, it's nickels, it's really not a lot. My problem is CDA. Unlike you, Alderman from the 11th Ward, I did get a meeting to talk about the points of what Riverview West Florissant did to not be able to qualify for the block grant funding. And when we went through that list of all the things and the issues that this administration and CDA believe that put Riverview West Florissant in a position that basically, in my opinion, was just drugged through the mud, it all flew back into CDA's face as not doing the job that they should be doing. And in committee, it was said that if they had been monitoring these organizations every month, this stuff would have been nipped in the bud, because monitoring is supposed to correct, improve, and still keep you sustained, but follow the rules. We have the Ethics Commission that looks at us aldermen and elected officials and how we spend our money. And if you do something where you feel it's something simple, trust me, they will make you feel like you're getting ready to go to jail. And not only that, it is public. It is on the website. You can look into anyone's reports to see what is wrong and what is right. When the late Alderman Gray Carter invited me into this organization 4 or 5 years ago, We had countless meetings with CDA to try to convince the administration and CDA as to how they were non-compliant, how simple paperwork that has been given and responded to just sat on desks and was ignored and was not followed through and was done properly. So a lot of things that we saw that made Riverview West Florissant non-compliant, even though they never were told they were non-compliant. It should have been told not to apply at all the way they made it look. But my concern is CDA going forward in this whole process. I'm like you, I came to the meetings, I listened, I heard HUD, I asked questions. I saw that they didn't even know the answers at times. I saw that CDA still didn't know the answers at times. And I just, as he said, government, I hope things change. My whole point in this is to get Riverview West Florissant where they need to be, where they get their credibility back. The services that they provided for our wards was needed. And my complaint, or my question is, senior home services, who are they? How do we get to them? What's the number to contact? Where to go? Where are my people supposed to go to find services that those people behind those desks really feel they want to give? So we have, for the past 4 or 5 years, knocked down our home improvement list drastically in both wards. And before that, CDA was processing our loans at 3 to 5 loans per year. It was horrible. So the way we put it, Alderman Gray Carter and I, to make it so these home loans were done sufficiently and correctly and line you up for the big stuff, I think was done properly under Riverview West Florissant. And we've been able to knock that list down. Now, I have to tell my constituents that that list is going to be combined with a citywide list. And you have no position now. You've been working toward getting service and you haven't. Now you're going to have to get in line with everybody else. And it's less than $1 million to handle that. We've been able to service a lot of residents in those wards and help them out. Widows who lost husbands that didn't know the proper paperwork, who lost insurance on their homes, who just needed someone to really get in there and do the knit and grit and get it done to keep them in their homes. And most of those people are seniors that want to stay in their home, but just can't make the repairs or the few things, or are constantly been ripped off by contractors or people coming through just trying to make a dollar. We've had to go behind senior home services. Well, I won't say we. Riverview West Florissant has had to go behind senior services and redo things that they didn't even get permits for. Something as serious as a handicap ramp. So my objection to this is, I understand we have to stop. I understand Alderman had loads of money, supposedly, that they didn't spend, but sometimes you have to accumulate those things to make changes in your area. I have over 500 businesses in my ward. I get $60,000 for facade improvement. Now we have no control over that, whereas I never had control over it. It was always first come, first served basis anyway. Regardless of who you voted for or whatever you did, that's the way I always did it. And if you didn't qualify, you just didn't get it. If you messed up when your paperwork came along, then you got shoved back down to the list and you had to start all over again. But I don't know what to tell my constituents now. And so I'm not trying to get any money. I don't want the money. Riverview West Florissant said they don't want the money. We're going to work forward from here and do what we've always been doing, which is servicing our constituents, providing assistance and support, and this organization will not go away. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 13th, you recognize the close on the perfection of Board Bill number 198 committee substitute.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the debate and the advice. I take a little different tack on this. Number one, what the Alderman from the 8th said, the feds just don't understand us, don't know, they don't know what we're doing here. What they've said is, we're not going to provide funding anymore to neighborhood organizations or CUBDOs, community development organizations, because they're not providing any housing development. They may be doing some good things, but they're not doing housing development. And most of us understand this and know this. You know, the alderman from the 8th Ward said something about he stood in front of a lot of trains. Well, I think he stood in one too many, because I have talked to him, you know, and explained this a number of times. It kind of reminds me of the old Cardinal pitcher, Grover Cleveland Alexander. He won about 360 games during his career. He's a Hall of Fame pitcher. He was pitching for the Cardinals in the 30s, and he had a problem. He was a great pitcher, but he was an alcoholic. And the manager at the time tried to talk to him, tried to get him to quit drinking, and eventually he thought, well, I'm going to give this a little show and tell. And what he did was take a bottle of tequila, you know, one of those bottles with the worms down there, the dead worms down there at the bottom. And he explained it again to Grover, what kind of effect alcohol has on your body. And he ended by saying, now, do you understand what I'm talking about? And old Pete said, yeah, drink enough tequila and you'll never have worms. That's how I feel when I talk to the alderman from the 8th Ward. I explain it, I tell it to him, but it doesn't connect. So I'm asking you to vote in favor of this bill, perfect it today. We can pass it next week. We need to do that. It needs to be done by November 15th, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
All right, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 15th, that we perfect Board Bill number 198, committee substitute. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Was that a no? Alderman Villa. No. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Moore. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Rhodey. "18 aye votes, 7 no votes, 1 abstain.
By a vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 13th and perfected Board Bill number 198, committee substitute.
That's the extent of board bills for perfection.
We will dispense with line items 17 through 19, 21 and 22, miscellaneous unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Monday, the office is closed, Veterans Day. Thursday, Public Safety Committee meeting, 1:30 in the Leisure Room. Friday, full board meeting, 10 a.m. in the chambers. That's the extent of my announcements.
Alderman from the 2nd.
Mr. President, I'd like to announce that on November the 14th and 16th, between 3 and 7 on Thursday, November the 14th, and Saturday, November 16th, between 9 and 4 p.m., you can actually go and sign up for low-cost, no-cost health insurance physically. There will be people there to help people sign up for the Affordable Care Act. At New Northside Conference Center at 5939 Goodfellow, walk-ins are accepted, but you can make an appointment by calling 382-9000. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Announcements. Any further announcements? Alderman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I just wanted to give congratulations to the president of the Urban League, Michael McMillan, for his honors that he received this week from Ebony Magazine. He was chosen as 2013 one of the most influential African Americans in the country, and his category of recognition was one of Dream Keepers, which assists those who are interested in the pursuit of civil rights and economic empowerment, and that's based on all of his collaborations and services that he has done here in the city of St. Louis. And again, I just wanted to congratulate him on receiving that honor. Thank you.
Any further announcements? Alderman from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. This Wednesday night is the general membership meeting of the Southampton Neighborhood Association, but more importantly, Saturday is the Veterans Day Parade, and before the parade there will be a ceremony. We will be celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Korean War, and I cannot tell you enough, after being at the Punch Bowl Cemetery in Hawaii, the sacrifices that were made by our military need to be acknowledged, and I hope to see you all there tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 22nd.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I would just like to acknowledge some of our colleagues who are also veterans down here at City Hall who have served, like Alderman Fred Wessels, Alderman Shane Cone, Frank Williamson. I don't think I've left anybody else out besides myself. Well,
the son of
myself.
Alderwoman Behringer.
Well, we're just talking about those who are serving our city and have served our country, and I want to give them a round of applause.
All right, Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I'm glomming on to the Veterans Day activities, but on Monday night at 5:30 at the History Museum, there'll be an opening for a photography exhibit of veterans who are homeless, and there will be a presentation at 6:30 if you'd like to attend that. Also today is the closing, as you might have noticed, for the Prop S applications or RFP responses. And people have been asking what's going to happen. Well, what we're planning to do is put those up on Google so that members of the selection committee can read through them, and those will be up next week. I have a selection committee already in place, and we will be talking about how we'll proceed on Thursday at the public safety meeting. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask.
All right, Alderman from the 20th.
Mr. President, members of the board, if individuals are looking for something educational and entertaining to do on Sunday, November 10th, from 1 to 3, two different times, one at 1 o'clock and one at 3 p.m. at the old courthouse. The old courthouse players will be doing a radio presentation of A Most Unsettled State, which deals basically with the life and times of St. Louisans during the Civil War. So that's free at the old courthouse, 1 and 3 p.m. Nene Harris put this together. She's written a book, and this is a play by some folks. I will be part of that play.
All right, excellent. Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on the motion to excuse.
Thank you. I move to excuse the Alderman from the 17th Ward due to necessary absence.
Moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 11th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adjourn the meeting until Friday, 10 a.m., November 15th.
Moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 11th. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? We stand adjourned.